Hello and welcome to the Christian Construction Podcast. This week we are discussing how to balance your life and the church. All right, fellas. Well, it's good to be back for another episode here today.
Yeah.
Man,
Brother Michael, you had a good week?
I've had a great week.
Wonderful week. A
Yeah.
little tired from VBS.
Well, yeah, tired from last week. And
Exhausted. It's been
camp?
rough, brother.
I'm at the time of this airing. I'll be at Light on the Mountain. Brother Stephen Aldridge and a couple other friends of mine.
Chris Winburn.
Chris Winburn. I was just fixing
Exclusively.
to say, I love Brother Chris, and
Yes.
He texted me right before camp, let me know he was going to be there, and so at the time of this airing right now, we are probably yucking it up around the lunchroom table up at Brother Melton's at Light on the Mountain. So,
That must be a word from Kaiser.
yucking
it up.
Oh,
Yeah.
we yuck it up, man.
Yeah.
We- yuck.
Brother Gabe, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. I'm glad to be in the studio today.
Studio.
We got to change backgrounds. We got to go somewhere. We will be soon. I mean, we'll go to Smoky Mountain Youth
Yeah.
Revival here in less than a month.
Me and Gabe will just pack up and we'll carry it up the line on the mountain
Come
this
to the
week.
mountain.
We'll head up the mountain. We'll record up there.
It'd be awesome.
That
Good
might
luck
be
finding any Wi-Fi, but hey,
I mean, yeah. Lord, you can't hardly find sunshine up there, let alone anything else.
pop it in.
Popping it in, yeah.
All righty. Well, today our subject is actually a subject that we were given before we started the podcast. We'd put a little feeler out trying to get some recommendations of some things that you guys wanted us to discuss. And we had, I guess, 3 or 4 people that brought up the topic in some fashion or the other, how to balance your life and the church. And I believe, we've all been in different phases of our life, so we got a little experience with it. Probably not, all the experience, but we got a little experience with it. And maybe something we say, something we can pull out, can help somebody today. So I'm going to get first into the Word of God. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and get out of the way our little shout-outs to local church Bible publishers.
Man.
And make sure that y'all still checking them out. And we got Verity Designs with Miss Jana Wisher, and check her out. Also, every Monday, of course, Brother Andy Wells and Brother Poindexter, Brother Aldridge, and the Higher Grounds podcast. So you guys keep, tuning into that and following that. And also want to make mention again that this is a ministry of the Love Valley Baptist Church here in Kings Mountain.
Pastor
North
Barry
Carolina.
E. Philbeck.
Barry Eugene Philbeck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He'll
We
probably
have to
get
edit
me
that
after
out.
that one.
You know, there's been a lot of great preachers. Middle name was Eugene.
Eugene.
Yeah. I can't remember any of them now since we're on
There's some
camera.
sorry colleges from Eugene, but that's the only thing I know about Eugene.
Where's Eugene at?
Eugene,
Eugene,
Oregon.
Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm from Earl, North Carolina. I don't know nothing about nowhere else.
They'll have a town named Earl. There's a
Yeah.
town in
He's from
Oregon
Earl.
named
He don't
Eugene.
know nothing about it.
Yeah.
Not
I'm from
just-
Kaiser.
I've been in Oregon. Didn't know there was a place called Eugene.
Wow.
Oh, brag about it.
I was about to say, just throw that out there real fast.
Traveled all
I've done
over
Well, I just
Oregon
been
and the
everywhere.
West.
My job sends me all across the United States.
And all
10
across the
times
world.
a year. All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and get into the Word of God real fast and get into the subject matter for today. So, Brother Michael, what you got for us?
Well, I think one of the most important scriptures is when we're talking about this subject. Of course, we did an episode on finding your place in the local church, and that was more for a person that maybe is trying to find where they fit in.
Right.
There's an old saying, get in where you fit in, and sometimes that's what you're trying to do. But I guess this is maybe geared a little more towards the person who is already active in their church, and they're having a hard time balancing everything. Is this normal for my life to be scheduled this way and what have you? And so we're not saying that we do it right, but maybe we'll give you some insight in the way that our lives are and the schedule that we keep at times. And Ephesians chapter number 5, let me go to the right place. Ephesians chapter number 5, though, the Bible says, see then that you walk. Well, let me start in verse 14. Wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. See then that ye walk circumspectly, that means to be aware, to be diligent, to be sober-minded, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. And that phrase, redeeming the time, just simply means to control, to purchase, to possess, or to make good use of. And I think it's probably, as far as something that is a non-spiritual thing, I think time is our most valuable asset
Right.
because everybody gets the same amount. I
Right.
got the same 24 hours a day that you're going to get and that our viewers are getting. And so it's up to us to make the best use out of that time. No one person has more minutes, seconds, hours, days in that regard than any other person.
Right.
And so I think it's important. He didn't say redeeming the days. He said redeeming the time.
Right.
We measure a day by the time that's within it. And I think, God, he didn't say redeeming the months. He didn't say redeeming the weeks, the years. He said redeeming the time. And so
Yep.
I think that speaks to the importance of the matter, which is every second, every minute, every
Yep.
hour plays an important role. We ought to try our best to redeem it.
Right.
Make
I
good use
recall
of it.
the illustration I heard when I was in school. Pastor Dennis McBride, he gave the illustration. I've heard it several times since then, I guess, that if you had a bank account and somebody at 12:01 a.m. deposited $86,400 in that bank account, but told you by midnight the next day that all that would be gone, that you would be back to zero, you'd do everything that you could to use every bit of that $86,400.
Good.
The truth of the matter is we have 86,400 seconds in a day,
Wow.
and once that day's over, we'll never get those seconds back.
That's right.
Right.
So it's important for us to use everything we've got.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Amen. So kind of the structure, well, I don't know if it's a structure, but kind of how we thought about going
The
about it
blueprint.
today. Yeah, the blueprint is to kind of work through different stages of life. And I'm the single man at the current.
For
Don't
now,
tell
for
Hannah
now.
that.
For now.
Don't tell her I said the word single.
You're as good
But,
as married.
Correct. In her eyes, especially. But so I'm kind of the low man on the totem pole. So we'll look at it from redeeming the time and making good use of your time as a single man. Now, I know for myself, especially so, and I think Brother Gabe could attest to this, especially so before I got engaged and all that. And I believe it's important as a single man. There's no time in your life where you're more available than then.
That's exactly
Sure.
right.
There's
Yes.
no time in your life that you have as much ability due to the time given to you and due to, obviously I have responsibility
Right.
in areas, but not responsibility in others that
Right.
other men would have, other people in the church would have. So I would say dedicate yourself wholeheartedly. One issue that I find a lot of young men make in my age, and not saying, I'm obviously not perfect, but they tie themselves down with so many other things. Schooling's a good thing, but that schooling shouldn't pull you away from anything.
Right.
When I was in college, I had to make sure that on Monday night I knew I was, going on visitation.
Right.
At the time, Brother Gabe and I, we went out every Tuesday night by
Yeah.
ourselves.
Right.
And Wednesday night was church. Thursday night was visitation. And a lot of Saturday morning was visitation.
Yeah.
Many times on Fridays, we would do something with the church. Something would be going on. If you go to a place like Love Valley, and I know every church isn't Love Valley, but if you go to a church like this, or whether you go to a smaller church, the truth of the matter is you can find something
Sure.
to keep
Right.
keep your hands busy with.
Yep.
And it benefited me in two ways, I believe. It benefited me, I believe, in giving me a knowledge of things in the church, giving me, strengths in areas of the church, whether it be visitation and some leadership roles may come your way in that. But also, because I kept myself busy, if you keep your hands busy, there's a lot of things you aren't going to get into.
Right.
If you stay into something, there's a lot of things that you won't find yourself in. And I know as a single man, there were times that people would tell me, well, your whole life is church. That's all your life is. What
What else
what
you
better
got?
is there?
Right.
And
I see that really has damaged you a
yeah,
lot.
I mean, it's just ruined my life.
Yeah.
But I found that to be, to bring the most joy to my life was just involving myself, and my mindset from the get go was completely, I'll never have this time again.
That's right.
I'll never have this ability, this availability to do all I can now.
Yeah.
So do it while I can.
I
you know.
think about that verse, let no man despise thy youth.
Yeah.
And I think about somebody who's old and who's feeble and who can't get around, and they're watching teenagers now consume themselves with video games, with ball. I'd say that one more time.
Yeah.
And I played ball, but it never pulled me out of church. But it's an epidemic now. But grabbing a hold of things in a time where you literally had the least amount of responsibility and the most opportunity to get busy. One, I think living for God young, it takes that time, and we prove ourselves as a young person.
Sure.
I feel I'm 22 years old, but I feel like I've proved myself through my years of a teenager being in Love Valley because I've been faithful.
Right.
Same thing with Brother Matt, Brother Keith. In our young ages, we were here. We were always here. And I don't think there's no question in, can I trust him to do the next step or this and that? And I think that's important for every young person to realize. Take this time because you're never going to have a time when you have less to do than when you're a young person.
Sure. Right.
I remember my dad telling me that when I was a kid. You better do what you can now because there's coming a day when you're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And it's true.
And I mean, I recall, I think it was Brother Jimmy Clark, had made the statement. I'm not sure where I was at when I heard it, where we was at, but he was talking about basically this subject, balancing your life in the church, and he basically pushed to the younger crowd, what you need to do is get a schedule, fill everything in that the church has going on, everything that you can. Obviously, there'll be times that you can't,
Right.
but everything you can be involved in, fill that schedule in, and then take the things outside of the church that you would like to do, be involved in, and piece them around that church. And if they fit, wonderful. But if they don't fit, cut them out.
That's right. Well, as a young man, I got saved when I was 18, come to Love Valley when I was 19, and didn't get married till I was 23. And so in that time period, what you gentlemen are talking about was what I did, and what y'all have done, which is keep yourself busy. Be busy in the church. What else are you going to do? I mean, when I was coming up at that age, there were no other young preachers my age, and the ones that were closest to me in age were already married, so they already had families. So I didn't have any young preachers in the church that were my age that were serving God. So it took me a little bit of just finding my place, and if something was going on, I was going to be there. I kind of like what Brother Jimmy said. In my mind, I'd pretty much, if something was going on at church, I was going to be a part of it. And every young person, if you're saved and you're single and you got nothing going on, you might as well be just busy in the church. Is what you ought to do.
Brother Keith gave us a subliminal message via text message. He said, "For the single man, it is the safest thing. Being busy will keep you out of some dangers and temptations. Being idle is a place temptation will find you."
What about that? Words of wisdom.
Words from the man unseen.
From the unseen. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. So, yeah, I mean, as a single man, not just you think about all the freedom you have as a single man. I say freedom, but,
Freedom.
freedom. Your time, your money, you're able to give more, do more. You have, you just have more that you can do.
Sure.
And so do it. Why not do it? Just give your life wholeheartedly to it and do as much as you can during that time period. And the Lord will honor it. And, we'll say something about when it comes to being married here in a few minutes.
Right.
But do as much as you can during that time period, because there will be changes made as you get older and make life changes, life adjustments. So.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
So, Brother Gabe, I guess we'll move. I think it'd be good to move your way on the matter. You've been married almost a year, I guess.
Right, 9 months. Close to
October,
9 months.
won't it?
Isn't it crazy?
Old enough to have had a baby.
September. Yeah, don't tell preachers that.
He won't drop a hit, will he?
Yeah, I know.
He wants grandbabies.
That's for sure.
I will say this: one of the most crucial things about being able to adjust from being a young man finally making that step of marriage and still be able to have time to be busy in this church is finding somebody that was already busy when you met them.
Yes.
And my wife was busy in things as far as going to meetings that we go to. She was there. She's in the bus ministry. And she's involved, and she's there with me as best she can be. And so I didn't have no conflict of interest there.
Right.
You know, I didn't have to worry about her wanting to go spend a day shopping while we're doing something else.
Right.
And if you're not careful, and I guess that just goes to making sure you find the right one for you.
That's right.
And that has the same goals as you do. But then there's that time of when I do get married on learning how to balance the responsibility of having a wife.
Yeah.
And it is different. And I can't say that I figured that out. I've not even been married a year. When I've been told I've got a long way to go.
You do.
But there is a learning period of how do I balance my because then you take care of your personal life via work, your personal life via the scriptures and your personal time with God,
Yeah.
and then your spiritual, I guess I would say, attitude and around your home.
Yeah.
And I'm in charge of that, and it's hard to have the ability to control the attitude of your home when you're not there.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful to make sure that you are there and spend enough time with your family to be able to control. Because you might, and I think Brother Rick he was messing me one day about being busy.
Yeah.
And he said, brother, if you don't be careful, he said, a lot of people your age, he said, I've seen it, even the preacher did it. You get busy, and sometimes you get so busy that you might turn around, that person that you fell in love with, that you wanted to be busy with, you've been doing so much, you don't even know who they are no more. And I think that's the important part of being able to serve together, because I'm not separated from that person.
right.
I'm able to serve with her and do things. So it's not like that I'm apart from her. And there are some instances where you might be like that. I know my wife does work for right now. And we have a conflict in our schedule sometimes. So it's a learning process to make sure that I'm taking time for God, for my church, and also for my wife.
Right.
Because if something happens to her, I can't preach no more, buddy. And that's just the truth.
That's right.
I heard Dr. James Jones make the statement one time, you know, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the church. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor in the church. It doesn't matter what your position is. You could have the majority of the responsibility in a church, but once you get married, your first ministry is your wife.
And that's
That's
exactly right.
And,
I've learned that slowly.
And so, Brother Michael, I guess you've been, what is it, 13 years this year?
Almost 14.
Happily
almost
married for how
14.
many?
Happily married for 10.
So,
Don't tell Miss Brittany, y'all.
We joke about that.
what do you think was the biggest transition, and how long do you think it really took you to get used to? Are you used to, you know, always involving her, or
Well,
always making sure that she's? Because I know there's
Yeah.
got to be times where you would like to do something,
yeah,
but
a lot of times.
you know you got to make time for her. But even with the church, there's probably instances you'd like to go to a meeting, or you'd like to. I mean, maybe you'd like to go on visitation with us. Maybe not. I don't know. But
She goes on visitation with y'all
she
more than I
does
do.
fairly often.
On bus visitation.
Maybe we need her on the
We need to
podcast.
get her on here. She probably.
Uh-oh.
But
Those straighten all
what,
of us
what do you
out.
think? What do you think? You know, the biggest thing you've learned in balancing, you know, a marriage and the church is.
Well, my situation, honestly, guys, I don't mean to be. This ain't no knock on anybody else, but my situation was a little bit different because at the time we got married, there were a few couples in our church, and through process of some bad things, those couples had maybe gotten messed up, or they had made some bad decisions, and so it wasn't long after me and Brittany got married that there were no other couples that were our age. So we were, for the longest time, we were the only couple our age, and then that were serving God too. And so when we got married, this is going to sound terrible. When we had no social life, I mean, I worked a job. My wife didn't work, and that's not a knock. Brother Gabe mentioned that Miss Chelsea works and is a wonderful nurse. But my wife didn't work, and one of the reasons is they had just got back from the mission field. She had not had time to go to college or anything like that. I didn't make enough money to send her to college or nothing, and so we had just made up our minds that we knew that the ministry was what I was going to be in the ministry at some point or another. I always felt like I was going to be, doing some work in the ministry, not just at Love Valley, but doing something in a big capacity. And we didn't want to have the conflict of, Brother Gabe talked about it, my schedule and her schedule having to line up. And again, that was just how God worked things out in our life. And so from the get-go, due to all of those circumstances, we just chose and said, all right, we're not going to worry about it. You getting a job, I make enough for us to get by on, and we want to make sure that we are as available as possible for whatever the Lord has. And so, again, we didn't have a social life outside of church. Everything that we had going on revolved around the church and what was going on. So really, our transition was not that hard. And
Right.
yours is similar to that, because everything about your life,
It's already there.
I mean, the man you work for, a member of our church, that makes it easy on you, you know? And so you're in a similar situation. Your whole life revolves around the church in that regard. And so it wasn't as hard. I guess the hardest adjustment was that now I always had somebody with me, and that turned out to be a positive, because now I don't have to worry who's going to go with me on visitation. You know, my wife's going to go with me. I don't have to worry about if I'm going to get paired up with somebody that I had to worry about them saying the wrong thing or doing something awkward. It's me and my wife going knocking on doors together. And for the longest time, it was me and her together, and that's how we
Right.
did things, knocking on doors or making follow-up visits. And so from that perspective, our adjustment and that transition to serving the Lord as a young married couple was not very hard, because we were already active before, and then when we got married, it's just like it was all the pieces coming
Right.
together, and it was the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
What we were doing, we were able to do it better. Barry Rackley said years ago, y'all will remember this. He said, the right person in your life will not complicate your faith. They'll complement your faith. And what you mentioned, what if you marry somebody who, or you might have just said a minute ago, what if you get involved with somebody who does not think the ministries of the church are important?
Yeah.
And you're wanting to go serve, you're wanting to work in the ministry, and they're saying, yeah, but I want to go
Right.
do this, I want to go do that. Well, it wasn't that hard for us, because everything we were doing was in the ministry, in the church, and so that's what we did.
Right.
That's what we did.
I got a verse real quick I want to read, brother. And Brother David Gibbs preached a message on this. And when I first got married, I listened to it once a week because I wanted to get this in my head. Most of us probably know this verse, but 1 Peter chapter number 3, verse 7 says, likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to the knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and being heirs together of the grace of life,
Amen.
that your prayers be not hindered. And I took that as I want me and her to be together on everything.
Amen.
And it says we're heirs together. So the best way I see that is whatever we want to be sowed together, so that way we'll be able to reap together the same things. And I think that's a big important thing for a family.
Amen. Amen.
I recall growing up, you know, I've heard a lot of different beliefs when it comes to, you know, we've talked about marriage and we've talked about being single. I've heard a lot of different beliefs on your job and the church. What's your feelings about, you know, a lot of people,
Like
they
working
get
on
kind of
Sundays and
mixed
stuff
up
like
on
that.
the working on Sunday and taking overtime when they could do things with the church. My personal, I guess I'll start out with how I feel is I go back to that whole thing about your wife. You know, she becomes your first ministry.
That's right.
And but I look at it as if she's taken care of and you have the option. Now, obviously, if you lose your job, she's not taken care of.
That's right.
You know, if you lose that, so you can't really put that in jeopardy.
Right.
But if you have the option, if she's taken care of and you have the option not to, that's where a lot of people get mixed up, I'm afraid, is they become greedy for that money.
Yeah.
They become desirous of that almighty dollar, and they end up taking more and more overtime and doing more and more with their work, which causes them to miss several things.
They get to, you know, a person, it's real easy. The job I worked before I started working here at the church, I could have worked as much as I wanted to. And I did work as much as I could as long as it didn't interfere with church.
Right.
There were times where they come in and said, guys, you know, chemicals, all this stuff's coming in. We got stuff to be done. And we're going to have a mandatory Sunday. And in those instances, when they said that, I told them, I said, I would just be honest with them. I'd say, I do not want to be here. If there is any way I don't have to work on Sunday, please don't make me. And if there was times when they, you know, when they could do without me, they were very great because I was a good worker. I'm not bragging on myself, but by their own words, I was a good worker for them. They would, if
Honor
they
that.
knew that they, if they knew that they didn't have to have me, they wouldn't drag me in there just to sit around and twiddle my thumbs on a Sunday. And so that was one thing, was that a Christian ought to have a good enough testimony where they could look at their supervisors and say, I will, if y'all need me to be here and I have to be here, I will do what y'all need me to do, but please don't drag me in here to have to. And then on the flip side of that too, there's a difference in working overtime to make a little extra money and try to get, and then working overtime because I
live.
cannot pay the bills. I cannot,
Yep.
I cannot take care of my wife, because the first thing that was established in the Bible was not the church, it was the home.
Right.
So you have to take care of that home, and then behind that's the church. But in all honesty, we can handle both of those and not neglect neither
Right.
if we'll handle our time properly.
I think the big deal now is today we're finding people who want. I had to have the new car,
Toys.
so I had to
Yes.
have that, and that's why. Or I really want this boat,
Yeah.
so I've
Yeah.
got to do that. And there's nothing wrong with having things like that.
I
to
got
work
in this
for that.
loan. I got in this.
Yeah,
payment,
well,
I
Yeah,
got-
and that's what
get
co-
in a mess.
Most people
Yep.
don't have. That's the thing. It's not like and in their mind, well, I've got to do this so I can pay my bills. But you're not just.
But
paying
what was the bill that you
right?
run
You're not
up?
paying your necessities.
Had
You're
to get a
paying your
Ski-Doo.
wants and your toys. Yeah, you're trying to fit that social life into everything else. You're trying to pay for it.
Yeah.
And people now, and we talked about it. We actually had a class at the church for financials and stuff like that on how to handle your money. And people now they see something they
And
want.
all
they
that
buy
does is expunge a lack of faith.
Yep.
And that's all that does.
That's right.
In the from on the marriage side to a personal side, whatever it is, when you do that, put yourself in that area. All that does is tell God.
Well, the
"Well,
chain reaction.
You couldn't handle this, so I'm gonna handle it on my own.
The chain reaction was I borrowed money to get something that I didn't really have to have, and now I'm having to work overtime and miss church, or I'm having to work overtime to pay for this something that I didn't really have to
Right.
have. And then on top of that, the overtime I'm working is overlapping church time to pay for the bill, to pay for the toy that I didn't really have to have. It's a chain reaction. you know?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well,
Domino effect.
Well, the thing is, we're not saying it's wrong to make good money. We're not saying it's
No.
wrong to work hard. We want people to learn how to work. It'd be a good
Sure.
thing.
And work as much overtime. My
Absolutely.
advice is work as much of it as you
Absolutely.
can, as long as it doesn't conflict.
Well, see,
with
and that's
the
a good
home
thing.
or church.
I run a side business. I put in alarm systems and camera systems in, but I have.
Whoa.
Side hustle.
Whoa, you
Hey,
get a little. Are you trying to put a plug in?
It's
over
lit.
here?
It's lit. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I wasn't trying to promote.
Are you
the
going to
business.
donate something
run
for us to
a
give
side
I was
away?
not
By the
promoting
way.
my
Take
business.
that and edit it
All I
out.
was saying was that
God.
I on my when I actually have time, but I actually work with a Christian, the guy I got to see get saved in my old job I worked with,
Man.
and we have an understanding. We don't work Wednesdays, we don't work visitation nights, but when there is a day and a time where we have time and there's a job coming up, and that gives us extra money to do with maybe something I might need to do or want to do, and that's great. But it's never took place of
Right.
the necessities of being at church and being at my home.
Amen.
Amen.
We talk about some kids.
I was about to
About
say,
some
Brother
babies.
Michael, we're gonna have to turn
don't know
to
nothing
you
about
on
that.
this.
I got 2 minutes.
For a long
maybe
time, preacher. For a
2
long
minutes-
time,
it's
I
a
have no
2-minute
clue what you're talking
drill.
about.
What we might need to just hold this segment for about a year once Brother Gabe. and-
And then me and Gabe can both speak on
Right.
it. Well, first of
Preacher will
all,
be happy.
let me say this: when you do have kids, it should not interfere with your faithfulness to God in the church. When we started having babies, we were dragging them up and down the sidewalks of Kings Mountain, and we were knocking on doors, and we were going to youth trips. And the only time when I really, really felt bad was when we would have to go off somewhere like youth camp. And during those times, we did have to leave them with people. But outside of that, we didn't. But now my kids are growing up. They're at that age where, in this day, everybody plays ball. You just mentioned it.
Oh, yeah.
But when I was growing up playing ball, and you have to remember, I'm an old man, 37, old man.
Gray hair.
So, 25 years ago,
No hair.
when I was in my prime at the tender age of 12, and I was dominating that little
Back
league
in my
baseball
day.
field.
Babe Ruth League.
Yeah, the fence was like 135 or 185 or something. I don't know. So in those days, you practiced, honestly. You practiced 2 days a week, and once the season started, we didn't even practice after that. I mean, but I'm just talking on baseball. And the basketball leagues were the same way. But now you go sign up at the YMCA or over at the Dixie Youth or wherever, and they want to play 2 or 3 times a week, and they want to practice once or twice a week on top of that. And Lord, when you get into football, you can't hardly breathe. And so with my kids, and this is not set well with a lot of people, but with my kids, my boys, there's so much that I need to be teaching them about spiritual matters. I'm not dropping them off at a ball field for
Sure.
for somebody else to influence them and put things in their life. And in all honesty, by the time you do that, they have spent more time with your kids than you have.
Oh yeah.
And that cannot be, no way in my mind can I reason that that is God's will for somebody else to be spending more time with my kid than me, influencing them. And so for that reason, and this is my personal preference, my children will probably never suit up in a uniform and run out on the ball field because of the demand that these leagues and organizations have. And I'm not saying they never will, but as long as they demand what they demand, they never will. And you say, well, Brother Michael, what's your scriptural basis for that? Well, I'm glad through the eye of the camera you have asked, all right? So in 1 Samuel chapter number 2, when God is rebuking Eli for the sins that he's allowing his sons to do, this was specifically what God said about Eli. He gave him all the things that Hophni and Phinehas were doing. And this is the sin that he charged him with. He said, "Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people." And so the key phrase in all this stuff that God's charging Eli with is that he honored his sons above the Lord. Listen, they were actually working in the ministry with him.
Oh yeah.
But Eli is guilty of honoring his sons above the Lord. If I honor my children above the Lord, it could happen on a ball field, it could happen in church, it could happen in a hunt club or wherever. And I think that's the key is our kids are not trophies that we're to polish and worship
Right.
and keep them shiny and pretty. Our children, we're training them. We're to be teaching them. We don't follow them. They're supposed to be following us.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, my children, again, when we started having babies, it was the same as when me and my wife got married. We just kind of brought that into the recipe and mixed it all together. And now all 6 of us walk on that path together. And so that's kind of been the philosophy that I've had as still am for several years, will be, raising my family in the house of God. So.
All righty. Well, we've run short on time here, so we'll go ahead and close. So until next time, we'll see you here on the Christian Construction Podcast.